Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle, Book 11, Dreadgod, Chapters 5 and 6. In these chapters, Lindon is just making sure that everybody has their lunch money and their homework in their backpacks, double checking, taking their pictures as they get on the bus, and letting the bus driver know that he's going to be doing a background check on her. Very concerned parent. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Andy for commissioning this episode, and Andy is here in the chat. Rob has referred to him as Andriel the Creator, which is delightful. I like the idea of all of us coming up with like cradle-ish versions of our own names, and we can come up with our own paths. Some of us can be sages, some of us can be heralds or monarchs, or I'm going to go with sage. Sage of endless breath, as a reference to how I just cannot stop talking. I feel like that has a good ring to it. Hi, Devin, Asher, Jan, McShard, Rob. Delighted to have everybody here. All right, kiddos, let's get started. So, chapter 5 opens up with Lindon leading Zeil around the ancestor's tomb. He is trying to get a handle on the scripts and everything that are going on in here. This is something that I find devastating because I feel like I just have gotten the hang of understanding how a lot of like Cradle works and the magical system. Like, it's very complicated. So, you know, that's part of what makes the reread so rewarding, is that once you understand it all better, you can really appreciate what was being set up here that you didn't fully comprehend. And now that the labyrinth has been introduced, it's like great in terms of how many possibilities it opens up, but also I'm like, oh, we're going to start doing new stuff. We're going to start a whole thing. And I just barely feel like I've really gotten the hang of this all. So we'll see if like it winds up being as difficult as I am sort of anticipating. Maybe it won't be. But right now, we've got Zeil walking around, and he is just overwhelmed by everything. There's, Dross is paying a lot of close attention. I assume he is trying to help Lindon, like, sort of map the place. And there are spots that they wind up in that they don't even know what part of the continent they're even on. And there's this moment here. The walls stopped blurring, revealing another long hallway of small wooden doors. This one hadn't been as thoroughly raided, and he quickly found the weapon he was looking for. A spear of pure white hunger madra, etched with scripts to funnel the madra into the person attacking. Is this the ancestor spear again? Is this just like a second one? You guys remember the ancestor spear? Jai Long's like... It's so wild, guys, doing this reread and how hype people were about stuff that isn't that impressive anymore. And, like, they were fighting for this spear, enslaving people for this spear. And he just goes into this room and picks it up and walks away and goes to the next room. And it's just like, he's just checking inventory. It's not even anything. Truly, oh my God. I'm just, it's really something. So Zeil is like looking at all of these different doorways, and he's just tracking and writing down, taking notes on all of it. And Lindon is asking about the different scripts, and he says, clearly these are two different traditions, but that won't surprise you. This outer room might be 1,000 years newer, so of course their scripts are different. I'm more interested in the circles that seem to regulate spatial travel. Lindon mused aloud over Zeil's comment. I have no thorough understanding yet, but they feel to me like guardrails, I suppose you could say. I could command this room to move, but without the script to define its location in relation to the others, it might take me 100 miles away or deep into the earth. And that I find really fascinating, like how the labyrinth, Lindon can demand to be taken to certain places, but he only has so much control over certain spots. He can only, like, some things are outside of his power scope, even still. And Zeil is saying, it's going to be kind of hard for me to, like, give you as much info as you're looking for because I'm not a sage like you. And Lindon says, yeah, but you were an archlord for years. Not peak archlord. I have always seen myself as more of a herald than a sage anyway. So you did intend to advance, you just didn't want to ascend? I gained what power I did for the sake of my sect. I wasn't going to ascend until I knew it was in good hands. Now, sounds like we have a chance to do one good thing before we leave. And this is when they go into this other chamber that has this depth to it. And I mean that literally and figuratively. This new chamber was made of larger blocks of stone, and each block was darker and smoother than the bricks that made up the earlier parts of the labyrinth. Rather than a deep brown, these were blue-black, and they gave off an even greater sense of weight. And Lindon says this is somewhere else in the world, but they couldn't tell where. The power hiding them wasn't entirely under their control. He suspected it would take one of the Abaddon to find them here. I feel like this has to be Osriel's doing. How old is Osriel? Do we know? Like, just his age? 6,000? 7,000? Like, genuinely, I don't remember if we know that. Lindon is... He shows him this complex rune on the doorway to the next room. Even with no power flowing through it, the authority it gave off was overwhelming, so that Lindon had to look away from it. Zeil winced when he caught a glimpse of it. He held a hand between his horns and staggered. And when Lindon's like, hey, sorry, I should have warned you. This place is super old. It's maybe one of the oldest places in the entire world. Zeil's just like, oh, it's fine. I kind of figured that I would probably go out by fucking with a script that I couldn't handle. I always love when people are just like, yeah, I figured that this would be the way I was going to die. I don't really have an idea on that personally. But there was a podcast I was listening to where they were wondering what their last words would be. And one of them said, I think mine's probably going to be, wait. And just the implications of that. Either you like fucked with something and you didn't mean to, or just like an accident, But I was just like, oh boy. So they walk through the doorway and there are 8 doors there. And then Lindon has to be like, no, 7. Because there is an 8th exit that was added later. Carved into the stone by what he suspected was destruction Madra. It wasn't covered by a door, but was just an opening into darkness. The symbol over its entrance was a crescent-bladed scythe. What were you doing? What are you doing, Osriel? So they go to their first left, and there is a window here that shows all of the... It's like looking at a TV that's playing different overlapping movies, and it sort of gives him a headache. And Dross is saying, that's not Dream Madra or Aura, it's like more. And Lindon says it feels older, and Dross says, yes, older than dreams. And I'm like, how does that even work? What? The second chamber was marked with an abstract drawing that suggested a closed fist or perhaps a shield, and inside it contained intersecting planes of blue light that gave off strong impressions of permanence and stability. I don't know. I'm trying. Look, I get really caught up sometimes in theorizing, and sometimes I'm not even sure if that's like a valid thing to be doing, whether or not I have any kind of the information that I would need to really make a decent theory. But part of me is sort of wondering if some of these rooms are linked to the Abaddon, like the major ones, but why would that all be on Cradle? Except that Cradle is apparently like the biggest source of new Abaddon. But even so, like, why would this be here? But why wouldn't it be there? What do I know? I don't even know what it's for. I don't know, guys. There were 7 such chambers, and the 6th gave off radiance that felt identical to Suriel's marble that had been one of his first clues about the nature of this place. And he asks Zeil, what does he think? And he says, you remember what I said about those other scripts being taken from different traditions? All scripts are derived from cycling patterns, so they have certain commonalities. Some of these almost resemble fundamental sigils representing certain aspects. That one over there probably invokes dream aura. I'm 90% certain this one is meant to be powered by force Madra. But the rest, I don't know much about sages, but I suspect these were early symbolic representations of icons. Very early, which suggests a completely different system of scripting that I have no idea how to delve into. And, there is so much in the chat. Sorry, guys, I'm going to roll back a little bit. Mixed Shard says, yep, people were so excited about one hunger spear, and now Lindon can find all the others throughout the labyrinth. Devin Harris says, so true. The rereads made me realize why shared knowledge and power-ups are so vital in Cradle, because so many took risks and obsessed over things that in the grand scheme are just dead ends. Let's see. Evil One is saying the original Court of Seven. Oh no, he says the original Abaddon came from Cradle. It was mentioned books ago. Okay. Andy is saying the original Court of Seven came from Cradle. Okay, so it is what I was thinking. Oh, well, that's kind of reassuring. I was just like, and Evil says the current 3rd gen are not from Cradle, save Osriel. Okay, cool. McShard says, I think the OG Abaddon were in the labyrinth at one point. Okay, yeah. Everybody's giving me the same information because the chat in Crowdcast does not update quick enough. So this is the idea of the void, the icons, which Lindon has the void icon, but he is talking with Zeil about this. And he says, Ethan told me sages were those who embodied a concept, often one that had resonated with them since they were children. And then asks Zeil what his childhood was like. And I felt like this was Lindon sort of fishing to see if he could, like, nudge Zeil towards manifesting an icon. Not necessarily, like, directly, but getting a sense of something that would point him in a direction. And or trying to get Zeil to think about what that might be. And he also asks what his Archlord revelation was. To give my life for the sect, Zeil said, his voice heavy with irony. Yeah, I meant it at the time. I think I told you before. The sacred arts have no end, and the mountain has no peak. The higher you climb, the more people want to push you off. If I'm going to climb again, then I'm going to climb. Then I suspect you'll need these. Lindon looked around. I suspect Monarch Amala's Grand Oath Array was based on runes derived from these. We don't have the years of study they deserve, but I'm hopeful you can get something from them. And Zeil's like, all right, well, I'll do my best. It may kill me, but what can you do? And then we go to Mercy. Mercy is not having a great day. This is rough, you guys. Like, there is something, we have seen communities fleeing before the Dreadgods before. But there is something about this scene in particular. I think partially it's the sheer perspective that Mercy has, because she's in a like high tower and looking down on a lot of the scene, and sort of she's able to comprehend more because she is an archlady now, and she can, you know, previously when they were like at lower advancements, they couldn't even really look at the Dreadgods and stuff because it was too much for their spirits to handle. So she is able to understand more intricately what's happening here. And I think it's a combo here of her being able to see the way that she can, combined with the fact that there are so many powerful people working together, and it isn't enough. Because, you know, when we had the Bleeding Phoenix sort of made to go back into hibernation for what turns out to be a very temporary period by Malice, literally, it was only Malice. She turns up, does her thing, it fucks off, done. And here we've got so many powerful people, and it's just barely enough for them to get as many out as they need to. It's unclear. I'm assuming that they are able to get all of like the main population out, but it's not entirely clear. There may have been some that were left behind, and just the whole way that this goes. So Mercy is just, you know how she is. She feels everything so acutely. She is so intensely emotional. And I feel like when people say that, it sounds like you're disparaging them. And I am not in any way. That's like why she is so effective a lot of the time. But she is feeling all of this really keenly. And she's watching at this point, like, I think it's Justice that comes up and says they can only buy us 10 minutes. And we get this description of how intense this is. No less than 7 sages and heralds, some independent and some owing allegiance to the Akura clan, had come out to support Malice in her battle against the Titan. For the past century at least, this would have been enough to drive the Dreadgod off to easier prey. Now, the Titan pulled its fist free of the ice, caught the bolt of red light on the shell that covered its back like a stone shield, and flat out ignored the sword strike. Its tail was a blur of motion, catching a tiny figure that Mercy could see only as a speck, and in the same motion it stomped down with one foot. So something begins hurtling towards her, and it takes her a minute to realize that it is Charity. And she creates this spider web out of Madra and catches Charity. And Charity later is just kind of like, you shouldn't have wasted your Madra, because I got hit by a literal Dreadgod. So if I can handle that, I can handle hitting the ground. It would have been fine. And I was like, look, Charity, I get your point, and I'm sure you're right, but also I couldn't have just let you fucking hit the ground either. Like, you know? And she has a broken arm underneath a broken shield. And that shield apparently is like pretty important to her. And later when she notices that it's broken, it clearly is a little bit of a blow, you know, pun intended. So she pulls out a pill. I'm sitting here like, oh my God, she's all broken. What's going to happen? She pulls out a pill, pops it, and then her arm just starts healing itself, and she is fucking ready to go again in like a minute. And I had to stop and go, right, yeah, I guess that makes sense. The evacuation is almost complete, and the Seven Moons sect is ready to activate their final defensive constructs. Uncle Justice says we have 10 minutes, a little less now. The Seven Moons sect. I like that. Sounds cool. So These huge towers begin to rise in every direction. It says energy ran through them as they shone white, giving off energy almost comparable to the Titan, but not quite. I have new orders. We are abandoning the tower. Retreat to Moongrave. It's that bad? If this battle goes on much longer, we will be risking your mother's life. And then she says, get back to the portal as soon as you deliver the message. The Titan is supposed to be the least intelligent of the Dreadgods, but I'm sensing the Titan vanished. And that shit reappears right on top of them. And I will tell you what, kiddos, I do not care for these new super powered up Dreadgods. They were fucking enough. They were plenty. We don't need this. Why are you doing this to us, William? This is just really mean-spirited now. They fucking teleported. It was like a mile away and it was already too close. And now this bitch just right on them. What the fuck? And Charity chucks Mercy through the portal. And she lands and gets like trampled by people, which is not a big deal because she's like impervious to shit like that. But she turns around and she's like, if Charity doesn't come through that bitch, I am going to lose it. And I thought it was really funny that her mom, she's like, she wants Charity to be okay. As for her mother, it's either I don't really care that much or I'm sure mom will be fine. Like just sort of her mother is such a foregone conclusion that she doesn't need to worry about her. I think it's probably that. I like to think that it's her not really giving a shit, but let's be honest, Mercy cares about her mom, even though she shouldn't, even though her mom doesn't deserve it. She does. So finally her mom comes through and then Charity comes behind her. And as soon as her mother comes through, she turns around and she tells everybody flee, which catches Mercy as well. The compulsion is very intense. So they begin to fucking sprint. And then she's like, all right, time to close this portal. And this Titan comes right up against this portal as it's closing, doing a here's Johnny moment. And its eye meets malice. It says its spiritual pressure caught Mercy, making her staff shudder in midair and slowing the flow of her Madra. Hundreds of people, closer and weaker than she was, fell like grass before a scythe. Their remnants rose and were reduced to shining dust in the same instant. This bitch doesn't just kill them, their remnants get totally shredded in a moment. Just humiliating. Like, can you imagine? This is a thing in one of Will's other books that I'm covering, the Elder Empire series. There's a moment where these two powers, they clash weapons, and the force that comes off their weapons kills everybody within like 100 feet in every direction. And I cannot imagine how disgusted I would be if I died as like collateral damage to a fight that had nothing to do with me, or something like this where you're through the portal, you're evacuated, you think you're gonna be fine, you got through the door, thank God, we're good. Nope. This bitch literally just being against the door can take you out and your remnant isn't even left. That is so rude. Like, just killing me is bad enough. That's already just so embarrassing. But then my remnant is nothing immediately? I mean, there's just no cause for that. That's over the line. Everybody, can we just agree? So, Malice is floating in front of its face, and It's roaring, the portal starts cracking, buildings are collapsing, more people are dying, and at this point Mercy is like, oh shit, I think I can't hear anymore. I think that my eardrums are busted. Malice raised a hand and Mercy heard the word within her mind. Close. The pillar of shadow winked out. Mercy hoped for a moment that the Titan's head would be severed by the closing gateway, but instead it slid back as the opening vanished. The last pieces to disappear were its golden eyes, still locked on Akura Malice with hatred and hunger. Which really, I'm assuming it's just focusing on Malice because she was the one most directly defying it. But I like to think that this monster remembers her from like the last time they faced off and that she did something that really pissed it off and now it's a kind of personal thing. Because Malice is the type to do that. She is petty as fuck, you know? So I could see her just pissing a Dreadgod off in a way that it's like, look, I'm always ready to kill literally everybody. But you in particular, like I've got to get you next time. So that section ends with Mercy flying to safety, and we don't see her in the rest of this section. So then we go to Surreal, and then we get this amazing moment, you guys. This is so much. I have got to say, this was true in the reread, and it's true now. Some of the things in the reread that are the most fun are when Ethan really gets to go ape on people. And there's no witnesses, so he just lets it loose in a way that we just don't really get to see very often. And this is one of those times, but on a level that is so far beyond what we've ever gotten to see from him before, that it's the first time, I think, as readers, that we go, oh, okay. Like, we knew what he was capable of in an abstract kind of way. We know what the Abaddon in general are capable of, and they are not able to do what he does. That's how good he is. But again, it's one thing to know that in a hypothetical sense, and it's another thing to see him absolutely poning bitches with like no effort. It's embarrassing for them, which I am absolutely here for. I don't like everybody being embarrassed by a Dreadgod because like really mean-spirited. But these bitches fucked around and they are finding out, and that is how it works and how it should work. He is like living karma. So we start off with Surreal not speaking to him. And he's been prattling, but eventually her vibe gets through. And he says, I'm sorry. I did regret hurting you. I still do. And Surreal says, you could have told me. And he says, could I have? And her presence says, no. After your disappearance was confirmed, Machiel kept Surreal under close observation. If she had known of your location, her actions would have conformed to certain patterns, which, that's enough. And honestly, yeah, he knew that. Like, he had to know. That's the point he's making. I shouldn't be making excuses. I could have come up with a plan to include you, and it's possible we could have deceived Machiel together. The success rate was low, but I still wish I had tried. Sparing you the pain would have been worth some more risk, and I didn't expect to come back to all the worlds on fire. I hoped you would show more remorse. It's hard to hear about this level of destruction and not be grieved. The difference between us and the other 6 is that we were grieving before. And I was like, yeah, it's really like not feeling like the others really get it. And I'm wondering what it is about him and Surreal, why they are the only ones that seem to have that sort of compassion anymore. What happened? And this moment, he could be forgiven for trying to solve an impossible situation, but he had tried to solve it in the same way he always did, by himself. And I only like 2 days ago passed the section where Ethan is fired from being the patriarch of the Aurelius family because he is doing shit without consulting anybody. And that does seem to be a real hang up for him. So, and the thing about it is, when you're really good and nobody can keep up with you, of course, you're going to feel like, why involve them at all? Why bother? Like, what are they going to do? One, they can't stop me. Two, they likely can't help me. So may as well just go ahead. And I understand that, but it's a weird disconnect because he has such empathy and compassion in certain spots. And then he just doesn't seem to have any when it comes to understanding what it is like to function as a person who has to orbit around him, And it's like, eventually Cassius is just like, do you understand what it is like when I can't see what you can see and you're just doing shit? And that causes Ethan to sort of stop and be like, I guess that's a good point. But he has to be told, he has to be asked to stop and consider what this is like for other people. And it's just sort of fascinating. And this is not something that this feels like something that is a real sort of human aspect. I am somebody who can be so empathetic to the point that I will swallow my own objections to things because I want to make the people around me happy. And I'm like extremely aware in a way that can sort of damage my own experience because I am not being honest and straightforward in the moment because I don't want to make trouble and I don't want to be a pain. And then I'm dealing with somebody that I genuinely love and I just tell them something in this like cutting way that I didn't intend it to be. I'm just trying to be straightforward and truthful, but I don't stop and think about what it sounds like coming from my mouth. And it's not until like literally a year later that I remember that I said that to them and I go, Jesus, that was really harsh. In the moment, I'm not trying to be harsh. That's not my goal. But it's wild. I can be so careful about just like petty shit sometimes that doesn't really actually matter in the grand scheme, but I get so caught up in whether I'm being nice or not. And then in interactions where it matters and like is going to affect somebody in a way that lasts, I just say fucking anything. So I really understand how he can be so aware in one way and then just completely not in another. But once you start to realize that's how you work, you gotta do something about it and like fix it, try. So sorry, there is so much in the chat. She's the one who has to try to heal everything and he's the one who has to kill the ones she can't save. They have the most exposure to the worst of the Abaddon's burdens. Yeah, I guess that's true. Rob says Machiel's a narcissist, Gadriel's a toady. Zachariel, that's right, it's spelled two different ways, is too self-focused, not sure about the spider. The spider seems like he's like all in his head. That's the thing with him, is that I get the vibe is he's so intellectual that he just doesn't like connect emotionally. And that might just be what I've seen so far. Granted, we do not know him very well. Devin says, Ethan was not trying to keep them away. They did not want to get their hands dirty. No, I don't mean his regular job. I'm talking about his decision to just like bail and not tell her. And also the way that he conducted as the patriarch of the clan. He was just doing it's just once he decides you're just going to hold me back. He doesn't, it's just why involve anybody? And granted, they weren't actually like listening. He had tried to tell them so many times. So, okay, so then we go to iteration 074. This is so good. Suriel says, that was made to detect judges. They're ready for us. No, they're not. And we go to Garavan of the Silver Lords, who knows Osriel by reputation. And apparently, as soon as people found out he was back, a bunch of Silver Lords were like, oh, deuces, I'm out. Which seems like the right call. And yet this dude had info from the Mad King, who's like, he ain't what he was. He's got some shit going on, and he's been a little bit downgraded. So he's thinking this dude is nothing to worry about. So he's just going around plundering different iterations. And this is wild. His core power was known as the 100 Hands of Terra Mara, and his will manifested a giant hand that scooped up an entire section of rainforest. The hand vanished, reappearing inside a transport where it would transplant the rainforest into a biological containment chamber without Garavon's conscious intervention. Can you imagine? That is insane. So, he's, fighting people off, and he's kind of confident at this point. I don't have anything to worry about. And then the alarm goes off, and he feels the two judges coming. And he's like, all right, well, I guess it's time for me to get everybody together and get the hell out. And we'll, put up a little fight before we take off. And it says void portals opened and transports ran through, traveling to one of the Vroshir homeworlds. His heart sped up and his eyes sharpened as he searched space for any intrusions. They were using a classic judge trap, designed around the fact that the judges could only focus their full power on one world at a time. While the Vroshir in one iteration stalled the judge, the others could escape. And since the Abaddon prioritized stabilizing worlds over eliminating the enemy, the stalling group could often get away as well. And he's like, shit, but everybody else is bailing, so I think we're going to have to be the stall group. So he's like kind of just sort of flexing, going, all right, I signed up for this. I knew there were risks. I was hoping he wasn't going to show up, but I guess we're going to have to deal with this. And then here comes Azrael. The iteration trembles as he shows up. And it says a class 2 fiend erupted from the void like a twisted mutant serpent large enough to take bites out of planets. It swallowed Azrael whole, but Garavon wasn't going to wait around to see the results. He ran. And he is about to get away, and then all of a sudden, he casts his awareness behind him, and all of the seals and the fiend are all gone. And his presence is like, hey, I know you had 16 transports a second ago. Low-key, there's only 15 left. My bad. Actually, there's 14 left. Wait, there's 13 left. And he's starting to be like, wait, what? Where are they going? How is that happening? And he has sent some of his dudes down, the little hands, with bombs. In seconds, the central planets would crack and die, weakening the iteration's connection to the way. If Azrael stopped the bombs, that was attention he couldn't pay to the Vroshir. There was only one problem. Garavon's 3 hands disappeared from his awareness the moment he gave them the order. No explosions occurred. Now there were only 10 transports left. So this bitch is just like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And Azrael's just like, no, nope, not that either. And he didn't know the man was capable of this. Deploy all shrouds and veils. He was sweating like a mortal. I love that so much. The usual is like sweating like a whore in church is the one that I grew up with. I like sweating like a mortal because it makes the person that you're saying it to sort of question why you would say it that way. Like, just let them think whatever. Who knows? Am I immortal? Who can say? And finally, their transport made it through the void portal. He let out a breath of relief and someone clapped him on the shoulder. He assumed it was one of the bridge crew, until, with a chill, he realized his presence hadn't detected anyone next to him. So, Darman told you I was weak, did he? Weak-er. He should have said weak-er. And he says to Azrael, would you spare me? And Azrael's like, would you rather face trial? And he starts to just like, wield a weapon. And Azrael is like, yeah, see, that's what I thought. Bye. So then he says, I have business with your friends. And he has decided that he is going to follow the transports. And this is sort of interesting. Suriel is already fucking with them. And it's a little bit difficult. And he turns up very unexpectedly. All over the iteration, supernatural senses screamed that the end had arrived. He didn't have his scythe with him, but he reached his hand across the gulf of space and spoke a command. Suriel sensed many hostile powers die in an instant. Several of the transports slowed, the energy propelling them having been wiped away. She seized them and pulled them back into Verge. With fewer Silver Lords to oppose Suriel, their portals began to slide closed, until Azrael zipped through the closing portal after the Vroshir. And she thinks for a moment that maybe he's defecting. Is he committing suicide? What is he doing? And she comes to the conclusion he wasn't leaving or giving up. He was doing his job recklessly, which I was like, yeah, that sounds right. That feels like him. And she's yelling, what are you doing? And he says, I'll be right back. And she says, I can't bring you out of there. And he says, I have faith in you. Oh man, I hate when he's like this. I really do. Like this attitude. It's him pretending that like I knew you could do it. 'Cause he pulled this shit with Lindon as well. But really what it is I'm going to do what I want to do. And you're going to help me do the thing that I want. And if you don't, you just have to live with knowing that you didn't help me do what I want. And that's your burden to bear. And it's just so self-involved. So one black gauntlet drew back. I have something for them. Azrael's hand came down. Explosions lit the sky of Amaranthus like orange jewels as millions of Guardian installations detonated. Azrael put his back to them and winked at her, the sky behind him a backdrop of flame. It's been too long since they've seen my signature. He slipped out of the universe just as their portal closed. If he had been caught, he wouldn't have been able to escape. Not with his power restricted as it was. Of course, he wasn't away yet. So basically these two like tendrils come out and grasp at him, and he isn't able to fight them off. They're managing to get at him. And Suriel has to step in and help. And when she saves him and he like comes over to her, she's like, what the fuck did that do? Why did you do that? And he says, you're the one who has unrestricted hound access. You tell me. Basically, look at fate and see what I did. I intended to strain the relationship between the Mad King and the Silver Lords and get them to withdraw their support, though I doubt it will accomplish that much. Realistically, it will narrow down Daruman's choices. And she looks, and I don't think that we have enough info to really tell what this means, but she looks at fate, and the Mad King was difficult to observe in the best of times, warping fate by his very presence, but she could see him being pushed into a smaller cluster of possibilities. And I love this moment. It's just this really impressive thing that he has somehow managed to pull off. And she is just like, I don't understand how you can be capable of doing something like this, and you couldn't come up with a fucking way to handle what was going on with us. And we see him be sort of unsure of himself for the first time in a while. When I left, I was confident it was the right thing to do. Now, I don't know. And they get distracted because there's still other shit happening. The moon explodes. And that's the end of that chapter. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that it is 47 minutes into this broadcast, and I have not yet reached chapter 6. I am not great at this. I'm so sorry. So, when we go to 6, we've got Lindon checking on everything in Yerin's pack, being like, I really wish she would just open your void key so that I could look in and double check all the inventory in there. He is dropping her off with Red Moon Hall, and he doesn't like it. She doesn't like it either. But he is particularly anxious. And this is one of the ways in which I relate to Lindon so much. In terms of his like lack of ego surrounding certain things, I do not at all. Just, I wish I did, but I don't. But then there's his like need to plan and his anxiety about trying to predict every like possible outcome and prepare for it. And that, my friend, oh, I get that. And then we get this, what it turns out has happened is that they have like popped up here, and apparently Yerin had told the Sage of Red Faith that she was coming, but I guess the rest of this crew doesn't exactly know what's going on. So essentially, like, Yerin and Lindon pop up, two massively powerful beings who have historically been enemies of Red Moon Hall. And they're worried about it, which is fair. And it says, there were more emissaries of Red Moon Hall surrounding them now, their blood shadows in various forms, but Lindon wasn't listening to them. As far as he gathered, they were panicking at the lack of response and trying to get some reassurances that Lindon and Yerin weren't about to murder them. They could wait. And I just, honestly, this is the part where I'm talking about, like, wanting to people please. Are they enemies? Yes. Are you so powerful that you don't need to consider them? Yes. I, though, would still be like, hey, guys, don't worry, it's going to be fine. And he doesn't until somebody, like, puts him on the spot in a minute. I would be like, everybody just calm down. And he's just like, fuck him. And that's real power. Being able to say, fuck them. They don't matter. That's, like, just such a clear understanding of, like, the real priorities. I'm prioritizing all the wrong things, guys. So he's thinking about Red Faith and what it is that, like, they're going to sort of trust him with. And Lindon is thinking, I believe the dude will be a really big ally as long as he thinks keeping her alive is better than dissecting her and trying to figure out what happened and, you know, getting information out of it that way. And Little Blue, who is hidden in Yerin's soul space, is very clearly kind of like, I don't know about this. And Lindon has to keep his confidence up emotionally so that she doesn't lose her mind, because she is linked to him and she can feel whether or not he's starting to have doubts about all of this. So he gives her a kiss. And for a second is like, do you think maybe we should just, like, cut your arm off and replace it? And Yerin is like, I mean, that's not a bad idea. That is something that we should consider, but let's do this first. And I really like the idea that, like, a trait of all Twin Star sect becomes just, they all have a remnant arm where they just suck Madra out of people. And finally, one of the emissaries says, we require acknowledgement of your intentions. Pardon, but who requires it? The Sage of Red Faith. Then bring him out. The Sage will arrive soon. He instructed us to keep you here and determine your intentions. Our intentions are peaceful, so why don't we all wait here for the Sage, quietly? We have to determine quiet. Yo. This man just straight up can't talk anymore. He's like moving his mouth, nothing happening. And then it turns out Lindon says, I've been working on this for a long time. I've tried a lot of different things, and I was hoping to eventually get to use it on Ethan. And Yerin says it probably wouldn't have worked. And we get a line that made me LOL. I think he was looking forward to me trying it. I found several constructs in his outer robe before he veiled them. He had recorded responses ahead of time. Can you imagine? What did they say? I desperately want to know. Probably something like, congratulations, I knew you'd get it eventually. Something like infuriatingly encouraging. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. He is so annoying. Okay. So here comes Red Faith. And he is like, what's up, girl? I knew you would be back. I knew it. You can't stay away because we know shit. You need us. What did I say? I fucking called it. And Yerin is like, you're not going to kill me, right? And he straight up is just like, kill you? Like, why? Why would I do that? Wait. One, you have done something that nobody has successfully done. Except for like one person. So I really want to know about that. What is killing you going to do? And two, you're linked to fucking Ethan, who ascended into the heavens. Do you think I want to piss that man off? What would I do that for? I'm not going to fuck with you. I'm not an idiot. And essentially boils it down to, not only am I not going to fuck with you, I'm going to make sure nobody fucks with you. I will protect you from anybody. You are very valuable to me. And I bought it. He seems very sincere. If there's one thing I can say about the Blood Sage, he has never seemed to be a liar. He has just seemed to be out of his mind. And then he turns to Lindon and he's like, and low-key, if you want to stick around, like, you know info about how she managed to advance like this. And I don't know if you even like really understand how to use your arm. I could probably help you with that. We could work together too. And Lindon is like, oof, actually that is kind of interesting, but no, I have shit to do. And then does I hope I can trust you. And Red Faith is like, literally, did you not just hear me? I just said, there's no reason. And Lindon says, I didn't want to call Ethan back so soon. That's how he ends this, which wouldn't work, I don't think, but I guess that's a really good threat to wield. May as well say it. I feel like that may come back to haunt him somehow, but who knows? So then we go to first we have a small moment with Yerin, and she's like surrounded by these like, you know, the emissaries who some of them are looking like they want to fight her, and she basically is like, I will absolutely ruin your day, so you may want to back the fuck off. And they back the fuck off. And then we go to Lindon sending Orthos and Zeil on their little mission, and he has those little like 2 little lunch boxes that he packed for them, and they get to this spot where it's basically blasted land and a pyramid way out there surrounded by ruins that has completely, like, you know, nothing is living. And yet there are some things living. So Lindon has to like point out where they're going because Orthos isn't as advanced as him or Zeil, who can both see from where they're standing. And he explains that the place is Shatterspine Castle. It was the home of one of the last Black Dragon Emperors that ruled the Black Flame Empire. The records are unfortunately thin, but it seems he was a herald who had a great rivalry with a sage on the path of the Last Oath. Their battles over the years helped reduce this land to wastelands, but she ultimately won by creating the Grand Oath Array. She sealed his remnant rather than fight it, along with much of his family. Does he mean along with much of his family, like living people or along with much of his family's remnants? Like, are there other family members that are just going to become unsealed from time that they're going to have to deal with? I'm just curious about the wording of that. I'm just, And Zeil asks, why hasn't a monarch looted this place? Lindon says the completed version of the Grand Oath Array was discovered by Northstrider at least 200 years ago. He used some of its principles to help design pocket worlds, but he didn't think the array was worth much besides academic study. Without insight into runes like the ones at the bottom of the labyrinth, you can't use the array, much less rebuild it. And I'm trying to understand this here. So the Grand Oath Array is the name of the technique that controls time, right? He used some of its principles to design pocket worlds, which I guess makes sense because you're sort of sealing this away into its own sort of area. I don't know how better to say that. But he didn't think the array was worth much besides academic study. Why not? Like, what Lindon says is, without insight into runes like the ones at the bottom of the labyrinth, you can't use the array, much less rebuild it. So he had no interest in just, like, going and learning about the runes? I'm just surprised that wouldn't have interested him more. I don't know. So Zeil says, anyone who can make headway on those runes without their eyes bleeding has my admiration. That's not a joke. I tried reproducing them last night based on my sketches, and my eyes began to bleed. So, maybe he couldn't handle it? He's a monarch, but nevertheless, I don't know what level those are at. Maybe he just couldn't do it. Bleeding eyes were much more than Lindon had expected, but Zeil seemed fine, so he continued. So, there's a bunch of chat here. Remember Northstrider provided the accelerated time pocket world for Yerin, so he got something out of it. True, but just like, I guess the freezing, I feel like this would be, I don't know. Everything that I hear, anytime that there's like a new technique that's shared in these books, I'm always just kind of like, well, somebody should do something with that because everything sounds so powerful. I'm like Lindon with like, can't I just have everything? When he's being shown the different paths to choose from before Ethan inevitably leads him to Black Flame, I was just kind of like, yeah, no, pick that one. Wait, no, pick that one. I was doing the same thing. Let's see. Oh yeah, they're all saying they're not willing to risk the labyrinth and it takes a lot of effort. And he said something about never going into the labyrinth again because he saw it as a death trap. That's fair. So let's say, this is when he says something about how Amala died in the Dread War, but she first broke apart one of her arrays to maintain the seal around Shatterspine Castle. You're after those pieces and as much of her Madra as you can find. Even if we can't manage to recreate the array, you should greatly benefit from studying her techniques. And Zeil knows about her. His Path of the Dawn Oath was an offshoot of Amala's Path of the Last Oath, so Lindon would have expected no less. Her scripts may be intact, but I won't be able to learn them without guidance. And then we get Dross. This is my greatest contribution to the cause. You will be bound in chains of debt to me for the remainder of your mortal life. Dross found this, Lindon said. He tossed a polished stone to Zeil, which was covered in white patterns like spider webs. It's a dream tablet containing all the memories we could get from her echo in the labyrinth. Apologies, it's nothing like her complete inheritance, but it should help somewhat. And then Zeil takes it and says, it wasn't so long ago that I was the one recommending dream tablets for your training. I'm pleased I can repay you in some small way, Lindon said. That was occurring to me in this scene as well, because I just finished Ghostwater, and it is wild to see Zeil like as such a superior to Lindon, and remember the way that he's like needing help from Lindon at this point. tables have turned so dramatically. And essentially here, Lindon is like, all right, so Orthos, you need to go and trap the remnant, but you're not going to be able to handle a remnant. So you're going to have to start with ones that are weaker and work your way up. And Orthos is like, dude, do you think I don't know how to do this? Like, I'm not an idiot. Did you do this with Yerin? I love when he says, did you give Yerin this much fuss when you left her? And I was like, he did, actually. He definitely did. It's a way that he shows he cares. It's a mark of affection. And Lindon says, the constructs I have left will help you with that, but the spirits will fight you. I can't do anything about that because you have to establish your own authority over the remnant. And finally, Lindon says, I can help before I take off. And Orthos starts to be like, we can deal with it. It's fine. Lindon opened the cases he'd prepared for this moment. Powerful natural treasures of fire and destruction radiated out, and he wove those strands of aura together into a spinning hurricane of dark flame. In moments, the Void Dragon's dance descended on the pyramid. While the three of them remained in the eye of the storm, black fire scorched the surface layer of all the surrounding ruins. Thousands of dread beasts were wiped away before they had the chance to scream. Orthos shut his mouth. I suppose that was faster, he allowed. I love this so much. I love that. Just like, okay. Because the thing about Orthos is he has his pride, but he also is a little bit lazy. And when I say lazy, I don't mean like he doesn't want to do his part, but he will stop at having done what needs doing. He is not somebody who tends to strive to overachieve like Lindon. He wanted to stay at this level of advancement. He had to be sort of prodded, And that's kind of the vibe throughout a lot of the books, where he just has these moments of just like, I know that you want to fuck with Harmony, but we could also just leave him alone and go and not deal with him at all. He's just not as eager as Lindon. So while he can be like, I can handle it all by myself, it really feels in line that once he sees what Lindon can do, he's like, all right, you know what? That's cool. Do it again, actually. So he has to open the world, tear it open. And then he has to pull the Madra out of this formation so that time takes back over again. And there's a moment when he's talking to Zeil and he's like, do you have all the weapons and the shield? I was fighting with sages before you were a copper, Zeil responded. Then again, I lost, so never mind. Yeah, I have the weapons. And he pulls the Madra out of this formation and turns it into balls of force Madra, and just puts them down, which I don't know if we know what he's going to do with those, but I feel like they're probably pretty useful for something. And he is sweating quite a bit by the end of this, and almost is like, maybe I need to take a break. And then all of a sudden he feels it beginning to break apart. When it dropped, the bird finally took off from the roof and soared into the sky. It fluttered to a halt very quickly, spinning as though to get its bearings. It wasn't a sacred beast, only a bird, but Lindon suspected it still must be very confused. I really did feel for that bird, just like, what the fuck? Wait. So, I want you two to inherit what you can. For you to have authority over it, you must earn it for yourself. Anything I retrieved and handed you would give you little benefit. And all of a sudden, there is this vulture that comes and is dragging Shadow. And it has a woman's voice and recognizes Zeil and says the Beast King will be pleased to see you in fighting shape once again. And I was so excited because, again, having read Ghostwater really recently, the Beast King is brought up and I had a moment of like, oh yeah, this guy. We never really see anything with him. What's going on with that dude? And so him being mentioned here, I'm like, oh, maybe we are going to get some more of him back. Because he seemed really fun. Like, I don't know. He just seemed like somebody who wants to be doing the right thing most of the time. He was trying to help Yerin and Mercy for like no other reason other than the fact that they were being picked on by dragons and fuck dragons. And that seems like a good attitude. So I am hoping to see more from him. And when Orthos introduced himself, she says, a turtle of your lineage ought to be ambitious. The Beast King is occupied in his battle against the Dreadgods, but I hear his voice in my soul. He celebrates the return of the Dawnwing sect's young archlord. He has sent me to ensure that you arrived safely, but I see you have the protection of a sage. And Orthos says, soon we will no longer need it. And she's like, you're kind of arrogant, which I guess suits dragons. And it would be cool if you could advance, but it's kind of a human thing to advance real quick. I'm surprised you're doing it. And Orthos says a dragon does not back down from a challenge. And that is the end of the chapter. And what I enjoy about Orthos is how much of a hypocrite he is all the time. He will just talk some big talk and then immediately back down on it. And this moment of just like, I don't back down from a challenge, when earlier it was like, but what if I can't advance? But you know what? I'm not mad at him for it. It's part of his charm. You know, sometimes you need somebody who talks a big talk. It may not be real. And I won't even say that because like with Orthos, it tends to be real. It's just, he needs like a little bit of a nudge. But sometimes a person like that brings the energy you need to like hype yourself up, you know? And he is a very good hype man. I will say that. So anyway, all right. I have got to wrap. But I believe that next time, I'm going to check this right now. I am only doing one chapter. Am I right about this? No. 2 chapters. The solo chapter isn't until 17. I was getting 7 and 17 mixed up. Thank God. But I did manage to do this in an hour and 10 minutes, which is pretty good because I was very behind, I felt like. Anyway, this has been very fun. I'm super excited. All right, everybody. Thank you again so much for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you to Andy for commissioning this. Appreciate you a lot. And if anybody wants to hang out in the Cradle No Spoilers channel on Discord, I will be sharing little bits and pieces as I do my reread. If I have thoughts that come up, I'll pop them in there. So, all right, everyone. Thank you again. Until next time. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.